This is Barry here, and you are very, very welcome to today's episode of the Passion to Profits podcast. Now, in today's podcast episode, we are going to do some magic in that we are going to transform negative thoughts into positive action. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all suffer with negativity. It's either the negativity in here, or it's the negativity in the outside world coming into us and affecting us. And you're going to wake up on days where you're just not going to feel good about yourself. You're going to have the little voice in your head telling you that you're not good enough to make videos, that no one will be interested in your eBooks, no one will be interested in digital products, and this idea you have isn't going to go anywhere. Because we all have it. We all suffer from it. But just because you've got negative thoughts doesn't mean you can't take positive action. It doesn't mean you can't walk in the opposite direction. And in this podcast episode, I'm going to give you tips, tricks, and I'm going to give you some of the things that I do when I suffer with negativity. Now, the first thing I'd say to you is, don't argue with negative thoughts. You know, you need to see a negative thought as just like a cloud floating across the sky. You can look at it and you can admire it and you can say, there goes a negative thought. But when you give that negative thought any attention, when you try and argue with it, that negative thought gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you argue with that negative thought, when you're saying to yourself, well, you know, who do you think I am? Do you not think that I can make videos? You're always going to find that that negative thought is going to give you a response of why you can't make videos, of why you can't make money, of why you're not good enough, of why this isn't going to work out. And it's like being in a tennis match that you're never going to win. It's always going to have a response for any argument you give it. Now, what you need to do is you need to see that negative thought as a cloud, let it flow by, and if it's still there, you need to just say to that negative thought, thank you. Thank you for telling me that I'm not good enough. Thank you for telling me these videos aren't going to go anywhere. Thank you for telling me that I'm not going to make money online. And by actually thanking that negativity, that negative thought, you actually kind of knock it off its feet because it's expecting a response from you. It's expecting you to argue with it. But by you actually thanking it, you'll realize it'll just drift off. And in those couple of seconds, because before maybe the next negative thought comes along, you can start to take action. And that's what I found really helpful. I learned it recently. And it's just as you have those negative thoughts, you can just see them for what they are. Thank you, and let it go. And then you can just take the action that you need to take. So don't argue with the negativity because it's only going to get bigger. You're only drawing attention to it. And do you really want to draw attention to something that isn't positive about you? Just let it float off and let it go on its way. So where does all this negativity come from? Where do all the negative thoughts come from? Well, you've probably got a good idea. It's all from our little life. It's all from the baggage we picked up over the years. It's all the things we heard said about ourselves. It's all the things that maybe said to our face. It's all the exam sheets. It's all the experience from our life where maybe things went wrong. And what happens is these echoes from the past are just kind of floating around and they just kind of torment us from time to time, if we allow them to. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. You know, the thoughts that you could have in your head right now, that you're not good enough, that you're not going to get anywhere, that no one will be interested in what you do, is probably based on stuff that happened to you before you were 12. Now, as an adult, as a completely different person, who maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years on from that point, do you think all those messages are relevant to you? They're not. Because right now, as an adult, you are a completely different person than the person you were back then. So really, was all those comments and things said to that 12-year-old, were they or are they relevant to you right now? Of course they're not. But again, we pick up this baggage, we carry it along with us, and we believe that everything that was said about us in the past is still true about us right now. But really, it has no relevance to you because you're a completely different person than you were back then. So it's time to put it down. It's time to see it for what it is. It's just echoes from the past. It's just echoes of conversations. It's just kind of Polaroid images of exam sheets and all the negativity from the past. Just see it for what it is. All that negativity is just simply echoes from the past. Now, sometimes when we have negative thoughts, sometimes having negative thoughts is a good thing. Because you're going to find sometimes that maybe you look in the mirror and the first negative thought that comes to you is says, well, you are a fat slob. Now, while that's hurtful, sometimes that negative thought could be given to us for a good reason. It wants us to take action. Now, we can argue with that positive thought, and we can say, how dare you call me a fat slob? How dare you say that my belly's sticking out, or I've got double chins, or all that? You can argue with that, or you can look at the negative thought and say to yourself, you know something, thank you. I really needed that. Because what I've been doing is I have not been exercising enough. I have been turning into a couch potato. And you're right. If I don't do anything about this, well then, this is probably going to lead on to health problems in the future. So sometimes that negative thought can actually point something out to you, actually make you take action. Sometimes it can be just a little bit of a little jab at us that gets us to wake up from the trance that we're in. Sometimes, unfortunately, we kind of go into autopilot in life and we just taking the same actions, the same habits, and we're just kind of running off. And then sometimes you might look in the mirror and we have this negative thought that suddenly makes us wake up, realize what we're doing, and then forces us to take action. So don't see negative thoughts as all negativity. You will find that there will be sometimes positivity in it. I've had it myself in my own life. I remember before I wrote my first fiction book, I had a negative thought one day telling me, Barry, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself as a parent. Because at the time, I was in a job that I hated, stacking shelves, and I was just thinking to myself, do I really want to be doing this for the rest of my life? And the negative thought that kind of came to me was, Barry, you're not much of an example to your kids. Because, how can you tell your kids to reach for the stars and do whatever they want to do, and then here is you in this job, stacking shelves. Now, there's nothing wrong with stacking shelves. I'm not putting down anyone who was working in that position. I'm glad of the job because it did put a roof over my head. It did feed my kids, and I'm always grateful for that. But that negative thought of me being an example to my kids, that made me realize and say, you know what, you're right. I was cruising along. I wasn't taking action. I believed that at that point in my life, I had done everything I could do. I was never going to write a fiction book because I'd never written one before in the past. At the time, I wanted to do podcasts, but I thought, well, podcasting was for younger people. I couldn't have a podcast. I couldn't do videos. And that negative thought spurred me on. It woke me up. It made me realize that, something, Barry, you've been an idiot. You thought, well, because you're a certain age, it meant that fiction writing, podcasting and all that was out the window. And what it did was it spurred me on to take action. It got me out of my comfort zone. It woke me up from the trance. And I wrote fiction, have a podcast, and do videos. All because of that. So although that was a negative thought, and although it was hurtful, and although it did really get into me, it did wake me up. And it did make me take action. And I'd say the same to you as well, too. Sometimes you need to see those negative thoughts as a positive thing that is pushing you out of whatever comfortable zone you're in right now. Now, what I'd say to you as well is that you're doing the best with what you are and what you've been given. Now, this was something that I had to forgive myself from in the past because you're going to find that sometimes bad things happen in our lives and sometimes we find it very hard to forgive ourselves. When I think back to periods in my early life, there was one point where we lost our home. Well, we didn't lose it. We actually had to sell it because the bank was going to take it if we didn't sell it. And I remember after that, years later, I was still beating myself up, not forgiving myself for having to sell the house. Here was me, father, 2 small kids, and then all of a sudden we were moving into rented accommodation and sometimes living in places we didn't want to live in. And I had negative thoughts coming into my head again and again and again. And I was saying things to me like, Barry, what kind of a parent are you? How could you allow that to happen? How could you allow that beautiful house to be taken off you and now that you're living in this crap hole? How could you allow it to happen? And I bet myself up with that negativity. I allowed it to, take over my thoughts. And I was really down on myself. And it took me a while to realize that, something, I was doing the best I could at the time with the knowledge that I had. It's easy to look back where we are right now, being a different person, having more knowledge and more advice, and looking back at the younger version of ourselves and saying, well, you should have known all that. How could you have been so stupid to make those mistakes and to believe all that? But really, we're looking back in time from the advanced version of us. So what we need to do is we need to forgive the past version of us. You need to realize that you were doing the best with what you had, with the knowledge that you had. You were doing the best. So you need to see that for what it is. So if you have sometimes negativity coming in, of things happen in the past. Just see it for what it is. You did the best at the time, and the version of you today can't be compared to the version of you back then. You're two different people. So let that go. As I said, it took a while for me to do it, but I found that when I did let that go, that did lift a lot of negativity off me. Now, what I'd say to you as well too is that when it comes to negative thoughts, when you find that you might get a negative thought saying you're not good enough to make videos, you're not good enough to write ebooks, you're not good enough to have a blog or a podcast, while that might seem a problem, there's always a solution to it. Now, sometimes we get so focused on the problem of not being good enough or thinking we're not good enough, we just kind of stop. We think that we've gone into a cul-de-sac that we can't get out of. It's a dead end. But what you need to realize is that for every problem that this little negative voice gives you has a solution. Because if there wasn't a solution, there wouldn't be a problem. It's like opposites. You can't have one without the other. You always have a solution for a problem. And then you'll probably find that you've got another problem that'll all have another solution to it. So even though this little voice might be telling you right now that, the problem you're facing is you're not good enough, there is a solution to that. And you're going to find that there probably is someone who'd been in the same situation as you, who probably was lacking confidence, who probably came from the same background, who probably didn't believe in themselves. And what they have done is they have written down or recorded their journey from where they started to where they are right now. And what you can simply do is you can take their knowledge, put it into your life, and take action. So even though you think you are faced with problems, even though you think, well, I'm never going to be able to do this, you can be guaranteed that somewhere out there on the internet, someone has been in the same situation. They've probably written about it, they've probably blogged about it, they probably have done podcast episodes about it, but they have probably charted their journey. And what you can do is you can simply use their knowledge to take action. So don't see that where you are right now is a problem that you can't overcome. If it's a problem, that means there's a solution to it. And even if it maybe isn't journaled somewhere or somebody hasn't given you all the steps, you can work it out yourself. So don't see the problem that you're in right now is something you can't get past. You will find a solution to it eventually, and you will be able to keep going. Another thing you should do too is use negative thoughts as motivation. Sometimes, what I've done sometimes is when maybe I'm tired or just can't get myself to take action, I think back to maybe some of the negative things that were said about me when I was younger. Now at the time, when I was a lot younger, I was bullied a lot. And what I do sometimes is I kind of lean into that negative thoughts. I lean into the nasty things that were said about me at the time, and then I use this for fuel to fire me up today. And what I do is I picture the bullies who used to bully me, and I picture me having a better life than they have, of taking actions that they will never do, of getting way better in life than they would ever do. So I use that negativity to spur me on. And sometimes you can use that negativity. Again, going back to, the negative thoughts actually pointing at a problem to you. Sometimes you can use that negativity where that voice says to you, oh, you're a fat heap, or you're a lazy lump. What you can do is you can say, well, I'm not a lazy lump, and I'm going to show you that I'm not a lazy lump, and I'm going to put my trainers on, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to do whatever I need to do. But sometimes feeding off the negativity can actually, anger you up, get your blood pressure going, get your blood pumping, and get you to actually take action. And I use it sometimes because I think back to some of those bullies I had in the past, and I know that what I'm doing right now is light years away from what they will ever do in their lives. And so I use that sometimes just to fuel me up. So you can sometimes use negativity in a good way, which is motivation, and use the anger and the spite to push you on. Another thing that you should think about when you have a lot of negative thoughts is that negative thoughts don't have much power on paper. They have a lot of power in here. When we allow them to run free range around here, and when we pay more attention to them, they just get bigger and bigger. It's almost like a tornado or a cyclone ahead. We have all these thoughts that are just racing around and around, and they just gather more power as we pay more attention to them. But you're going to find if you get a piece of paper and you get a pen and you write those negative thoughts down, you're going to find it's going to take a lot of power away from them. Because what you'll find is that some of the ridiculous things that in your head right now make sense, when you actually put it on paper, you're going to look at it, you're going to realize and say, why have I believing that? Why have I been believing that? Like, how ridiculous of a thought is that? Again, something like it could be maybe telling you that you're not good enough to make videos. And when you write that down and you say to yourself, you're not good enough to make videos, and you're looking at that sentence on the page, and you're thinking to yourself, how have I allowed this sentence to hold me back, that I'm not good enough to make videos? Now, what you can do probably is write an argument down on that piece of paper of why you are good enough, of why you can make the videos. But sometimes just taking that out and put it on paper, it takes all the power away from that negativity. Sometimes you can laugh at it. You'd realize how stupid have you been to allow that thing just to dwell up. And by actually taking that negative thought out and put it on a piece of paper, you've actually got it out of your head. And sometimes you could find that maybe that negative thought might never come back because you've just seen how ridiculous it is. So try that out sometimes. You find that maybe the negativity is bringing you down. Write it down on a piece of paper and just look at it and see sometimes how stupid it is. And maybe write down maybe some arguments of why it's wrong, just to build some positivity in your head about that thought being wrong. Now, I'd also say to you is that what can you control and not control? Sometimes when it comes to negativity, we just kind of get lost. We just lose ourselves in it. But what you need to do sometimes, you need to pull on the reins, and you need to slow it up, and you need to look at that negative thought. And you need to say to yourself, well, what am I in control of? And what am I not in control of? Take social media, for example. It's very easy just to get swept up in all the negativity. It's easy to get swept up in all the news, all the kind of things that are going wrong in the world, and then allowing that to take over your life. But when you actually think for a moment, what have you control over? You're going to find that 99.999% of that stuff out there you've no control over it. You can't change it in any way. It's going to happen regardless of what you do. What you need to realize is the thing you can control is how you think about yourself and what you do. Those are probably the two biggest things that you can do. So if those are the only thing that you have 100% control over, well, then that is where you should be focusing on. What you're thinking and what you're doing. So don't allow all the kind of, all the nonsense out here to distract you or take on negativity, even more negativity from the outside world and add it to the mess that's already in here. See what you're in control of and bring the control back to you. And then what I'd say to you is sometimes talk it out. If you have any negativity, if you can find maybe a group of people, maybe a little forum or a community who would be interested in helping you out, kind of working off each other, you can talk it out. Again, like writing it down on a piece of paper, sometimes getting our negativity out of our head. When we actually listen to ourselves say it to other people, we realize, God, how was I so stupid to believe that? And again, that takes the power away from it. Now, if you find that maybe you don't have a group that you can actually share your thoughts with, a thing that I use from time to time is I talk it out using EFT. Now, if you don't know what EFT is, I'm sure if you go to YouTube and just type in EFT, it's called Emotional Freedom Technique. And basically what it is, it's a simple tapping technique. And what you do is you say a negative thought, and then you tap on different parts of your face and on your body. And these are kind of like acupuncture points. And the more you kind of say that negative thought, that negative statement about yourself, and the more you tap on it, you'll find it actually loses its power. It loses its intensity. And once you do a couple of rounds of this EFT, you're going to find that you're going to say that statement and it's not going to have any relevance to you. It's going to be like holding it off in the distance or on the piece of paper and saying, well, that's not me. So if you find that maybe you don't have a group of people, or maybe you're too embarrassed to talk about something that is affecting you right now, I highly recommend you try out EFT because it works for me and it does kind of distress me sometimes when sometimes I do lose myself in this negativity. So try that out. It works for me and I know it'll work for you as well too. And again, finally, celebrate your success on overcoming negativity because most people will listen to that little voice in their head, assume that it's right. Assume that it is telling them that they can't make videos for a good enough reason, that they'll never amount to anything, and that no one will be interested in buying any of their products or following them or anything like that at all. And when you kind of take the steps I've given you, and every time you do overcome that negativity, every time you do take a positive action, even though you have a negative thought, you should celebrate it. And by celebrating it, you are actually going to build yourself up. Going to make you start to believe that even though you think negatively, even though you have self-doubt, even though you have negative thoughts, it doesn't mean you can't take positive action. So be good to yourself. Go easy on yourself. Forgive yourself. And as I said, realize that if there is anything in the past, see it for what it is. It was another version of you years back that has no relevance to the person that you are right now, and that at the time you were doing the best with what you had and what you knew. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave them below. And you might like to know about the book series that we are doing over here on the Amazon Kindle store. And what we're doing is we are turning each of these podcast episodes into its own individual Kindle book. So if you want to find out more about the Kindle books on Amazon, if you do a search for Passion to Profit, or if you do search for Writecom Team, you will find the collection of podcast books over in the Kindle store. So as always, have a lovely day. Take care. Bye-bye.